So hello everyone, and thanks for the intro, Jess. So this is going to be, again, part of the LCMS Fundamentals webinar series. I'm going to be looking today at maintenance and troubleshooting. So this is essentially the presentation as a whole. So we're going to go through the mass spectrometer, the LC system and column, and then data troubleshooting also. So first of all, we're going to look at the mass spec and then going to move on to the other two portions. So in terms of best practices for the mass specs, there's a few real sort of tips and a few of the main aspects of the mass spec and maintaining the instrument as well as it can be. So first of all, the diverter valves. This is on essentially all of our systems here. And this is just to use to divert your eluent stream from the MS to waste. And so this is really important, essentially, especially if you've got dirty samples, to make sure that you're diverting away from the MS as much as you possibly can be. This is due to, if you've got dirty samples, you don't want that going down the MS because it's going to essentially speed up dirty in the front end. And then you're going to have to clean the front end. You might have to get a service engineer out. So it's always best to divert as much as possible to waste outside of your analyte elution. The next step is front end cleaning. So this is what you'll end up having to do if you maybe don't divert away. But this is a build up that always occurs over time, especially, like I say, if you're doing hundreds of different samples, and especially if you've not got a great sample preparation, or you're having to inject really concentrated samples down your system. And this is your curtain plate. So we've got the source of the system here. So if you take the source of your system off, you can see the curtain plate, which is essentially where most of the dirt and most of the build-up is going to be. And so before every analysis, I'd say, take the curtain plate off, give it a little clean with maybe just some methanol and water, or a mixture of both, maybe a little bit of acid in there, maybe acetic or formic, just to make sure that's as clean as possible before you start, because you will see, especially if that's quite dirty, a little bit of a loss of sensitivity, which you can get back by cleaning it. It will give a tiny bit of a boost by doing that and make sure your system is ready. We can also see we're cleaning the orifice plate here, so we can also clean the orifice plate in the bottom image. However, any further back than that, you need to break the vacuum, so you have to vent the system. So unless you have to, we typically don't recommend that, or try not to do it too often, because your service engineer will clean the system at the time of the PM or the PQ of the instrument. Probe functionality now as well. So the probe essentially is going to come here. It's what the LC flow is coming from. And so what I'd typically do, especially if you're having quite a lot of back pressure that you're not sure where that's coming from, is just to make sure that the probe is flowing, the eluent stream is flowing through the probe nicely. So you can take the probe off and attach that just directly to the LC pump and flow at 1 mil a minute. And you'll be able to see here, you want a consistent drip. You don't want a pressurized spray, especially when it's not connected to the source. You're just wanting a nice constant drip out of the end of the probe. And that's really telling you that there's no issues with the probe. It's flowing nicely. And you can also see, once you've attached the probe to the system and the gases are all running, that you want a continuous stream out of the bottom of the probe. And that's when you really see more of a spray, because the gases are active. And finally, on this slide, looking at the roughing pump oil, typically I'd say to customers, you don't really need to look at this, but it is something to always be aware of, especially because the roughing pump is typically sort of hidden away in a cupboard. You never really look at it unless there's an issue, or unless you're venting the system. So that's something I'd also keep a check on. Just make sure you've got enough oil and the oil hasn't discolored over time. Although your service engineer will, every time he's doing the PM, will usually change the oil, or at least